All right, Joe Biden already making it clear what would happen if President Trump's tax cuts, if he replaces him in the White House.
Biden telling donors, quote, Trump's irresponsible sugar-high tax cuts had already pushed us into a $1 trillion deficit. I'm going to get rid of the bulk of Trump's $2 trillion tax cut. And a lot of you may not like that, but I'm going to close loopholes like capital gains and stepped up basis.
Here to react is Fox News contributor and former White House press secretary Sarah Sanders. Good morning to you, Sarah.
Good morning. Great to be with all of you.
Good to see you. We want to get your reaction of that, but doesn't it come down to what's important to you? Because he also said, I mean, if you own a company, you're in trouble if Biden wins, because he said he wants to raise the corporate tax cut to 28%. Under President Trump, it used to be 35%. He lowered it to 21%. But if you live in one of these blue states like New York, where taxes are so high, it's actually going to help those folks if he does cut those, or he does change the tax cuts that President Trump implemented.
The last thing our country needs right now is higher taxes. And a vote for Joe Biden is exactly what would happen. He's going to raise our taxes, which would inflict more pain and more hardship on American workers. A vote for Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and socialists like AOC is the very last thing that we need to do to help rebuild our economy and help workers who need it the very most at this point in time. Donald Trump has rebuilt our economy once, and he should be trusted to do it again.
Sarah, here's the reality of it. And I know it's easy to say, well, the polls were wrong last time. But when you have 8 or 9 polls that say the same thing, I think you have to take note if you're inside the Trump team like you. They roughly have almost the entire Republican vote. You guys have 36%. You need to add 10 points in order to win that. Where's the strategy to widen the attractiveness of your campaign, to get the independents, which you beat Hillary Clinton with now? Right now, Joe Biden has the independents on average by about 10 points. You had the independents last time. What is the plan to widen the base?
You know, I think it's real simple. There are a couple of things. Number one, the economy still reigns king, and no one should be better and more equipped to handle rebuilding the economy than somebody who's already done it, like President Trump. Also, you have 3 big voting blocks: seniors, women, and these two, along with evangelicals, are places where the president should do very well. Let's not forget, Donald Trump is still the ultimate outsider, the disruptor, the change agent, going up against the ultimate Washington insider. Joe Biden is a liberal career politician who has been part of the problem for the last 50 years. Donald Trump has only been there for 3 years and already managed to do a tremendous amount of good. A vote for Joe Biden is a vote for free health care for illegal immigrants. It's a vote against good judges. It's a vote against protecting the unborn. These are things that Donald Trump needs to remind voters of, make that contrast, and I think he will do extremely well with those 3 key voting blocks that he needs to win. Let's go back to the basics for Donald Trump: change agent, disruptor, outsider. That is a winning message for this president, and I think if he stays focused on it, he's going to do extremely well in November.
Well, speaking of disruptor, the disruptor in 2020 is COVID. Because when you looked at the economy and everything, the president was way ahead. He was going to win that argument. But I've heard surrogates for Joe Biden and the Democrats in general on television over about the last week, and every question, regardless of what it is about, they bring it back to COVID and the administration's response to it. Is that not the real challenge of the administration, to figure out the good answers? Because by November 3rd, you know, we're already over 125,000 Americans have died from it, and that is a number that is heartbreaking. And when they say, look, he didn't do enough, and he goes through the list of things he did, we know this is going to be their big issue.
Yeah, and I think if Donald Trump hadn't been president, that number could have been much higher and could have been much worse. Thankfully, the president took some early steps like stopping travel, which a lot of Democrats criticized him for. One of the other things that Donald Trump did that I think was truly remarkable, that he gets no credit for, is that he got government out of the way. He allowed American companies to step up, American ingenuity to take over when we needed supplies and resources. He cut the red tape and let Americans do what they do best. And he passed a lot of the decision making down to state and local governments who were closest to the problem. He did exactly what the federal government should have done. And I think that it has been completely missed, and they are not getting enough credit for allowing individual states and municipalities and cities to make those decisions for the people in their community. In some cases, that's worked extremely well. In other cases, I think we need to hold some of those individuals that made those decisions responsible for not taking the best course of action they could have for the citizens in their community.
So I don't know if you've noticed or have been watching the show, we've been talking about the chaos that's happening in our cities. Los Angeles cuts $143 million from the budget. Not a word from Joe Biden. $1 billion coming out of the NYPD budget. Minneapolis now has peace officers. Joe Biden says he's not for defunding the police. But is that enough?
Not at all. We are a country of law and order, and we have to reestablish law and order. No one can do that better than Donald Trump. It's another great message for this president. Look, there are some changes and reforms that need to happen, but that doesn't mean we need to allow violence and chaos to run rampant across the cities of this country. We need people to step up. We need to reestablish law and order.
But
Donald
Sarah,
Trump has
where
been
is
talking
Joe
about
Biden
that.
on this?
Where is Joe Biden to lead on this?
If right now the gap is so big and the Biden people believe it between him and the president, there's no reason for him to leave the basement. Unless you guys can close the gap, the first time we might see him is November 3rd or at the debates. And a lot of the mail-in voting will happen already before September 1st. How do you close the gap enough to force Biden out of the basement?
Again, I think Donald Trump is the best person to make the case that he is still the outsider, still the disruptor, the person that the country needs to rebuild the economy that he's already done, reestablish law and order. These are areas of strength. The president needs to stay focused on that message, and I think he will beat Joe Biden in November if he does that.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much for being with us.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.